Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. My name's Mitchell. I'm 29 now. And even after everything, I can still picture the moment my fiancée threw the ring at me, like a scene from a melodrama neither of us had auditioned for. 2 years later, she still can't hide the pain in her eyes when she sees me, living the life she once said we'd build together. I met Alina, who's now 26, on one of those nights that doesn't seem real until years later, when you're replaying it in your head for the 100th time. It was 2 a.m., and I'd been holed up in the university library, glassy-eyed and numb after 12 straight hours of debugging a particularly stubborn block of code. My laptop, my lifeline, sat open in front of me, surrounded by empty Red Bull cans and a pile of crumpled notes. That's when it happened. She came around the corner like a caffeinated tornado, perfectly styled hair, phone in one hand, oversized coffee cup in the other, and promptly tripped over the uneven rug beneath our feet. The coffee arced through the air like it had a vendetta and splashed across my laptop in one catastrophic splash. I stared, blinked, then exhaled the longest sigh I'd released in days. Well, I said flatly, wiping at the keys with my sleeve, at least now my code has some flavor. To my surprise, instead of bolting away in embarrassment or offering a nervous apology, she burst into laughter. Not a small giggle, genuine, eyes crinkling, belly-deep laughter. "God, I am so sorry," she said, crouching to help with the mess. "I swear I'm not usually this clumsy." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Because this feels like a recurring habit." "I'm Alina." She extended a hand, grinning despite the wreckage. "Destroyer of electronics." "Mitchell," I replied. "Survivor of latte-based disasters." That night turned into the next 4 years of my life. Alina became the center of my universe. 8 months of that time we were engaged. I spent half a year saving for the ring. Skipped lunches, took freelance gigs nobody wanted, and lived off instant noodles just to afford the diamond she'd once pointed at in a store window, thinking I wasn't paying attention. When I finally proposed, she cried. Said yes before I could even finish my sentence. She posted every angle of the ring on social media with captions like "Forever starts now." We weren't living lavishly. I had a third-floor walk-up, about 650 square feet. The kind of place people call cozy when they mean cramped. The plumbing groaned, the paint peeled, and our landlord ghosted maintenance requests like it was a competitive sport. But we made it ours. We strung warm lights from Target across the ceiling, framed some of my old concert posters. And then there was Pixel, my cat. A grumpy rescue tabby who loved knocking over mugs and walking across keyboards mid-code. Alina used to say she was a dog person, but I'd catch her crouched by the kitchen counter whispering to him when she thought I couldn't hear. Pixel would curl up between us every night like he was the glue holding everything together. Her family never warmed up to me. They didn't need to say it outright. Their eyes did enough talking. Her mother would glance at me like I was an overdue bill she'd rather not pay. Her father always asked how my little computer project was going, the way you'd humor a toddler showing off scribbles. Every holiday gathering at their country club felt like I'd wandered into a play I wasn't cast in. I'd sit there, trying to be polite, pretending not to notice the jabs disguised as questions, or the laughter that died too quickly when I entered the room. Alina used to roll her eyes after those dinners. "They're obsessed with money," she said once, tossing her heels off in the passenger seat of my beat-up Corolla. "I don't care about any of that crap. You and me? We've got something real." We'd eat Chinese takeout on my futon, sharing dumplings while watching old sitcoms on my laptop, a machine that took 5 whole minutes to boot. She always said none of the status stuff mattered. But eventually it did. The first crack? It showed up 6 months before it all fell apart. One of her college sorority sisters was getting married. A massive, over-the-top wedding. Destination venue. Champagne towers. Designer everything. "I want us to look our best," Alina had said one night, scrolling through Pinterest for suit ideas. "I know it's expensive, but you'll look so good in a tux, babe." So I started saving again. Took late-night gigs. Skipped on new shoes. Anything to rent a decent tuxedo and buy a wedding gift. I thought it would be fun. A sort of preview of our own celebration. Just the two of us playing dress-up in the fantasy of what our wedding might look like one day. I'd never been to a vineyard before, let alone one that looked like something out of a luxury travel ad. When we arrived, I felt like I'd stepped into another world, where everything gleamed too brightly and smelled faintly of old money. There were towering ice sculptures shaped like swans. A live orchestra playing something delicate and expensive sounding. Waiters in black tuxedos floated by with flutes of champagne that, based on the brand I recognized, easily cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Everyone around us looked like they'd been styled by professionals. Not a hair out of place. I tugged self-consciously at my rented tuxedo collar. Alina, on the other hand, moved through the crowd like she belonged there. Laughing, sipping, catching up with sorority sisters and former classmates. They talked about their jobs at prestigious law firms, luxury condos downtown, and holidays in Capri or the south of France. I mostly just stood there with a drink in my hand, nodding and forcing small talk. Anytime I mentioned my startup, how we were building something new, something exciting, I'd get a polite smile, and then the conversation would evaporate like mist. I had specifically asked Alina, begged her, really, not to seat me with her college crowd. I knew how those conversations would go, but we weren't with them. We were seated with something even worse, her parents' friends. A table full of older, sharp-suited men and their bejeweled wives, all deeply invested in real estate and things I had no clue about. I tried to hold my own. So, what exactly do you do, Mitchell? One of them asked between bites of salmon glazed with something I couldn't pronounce. I co-founded a tech startup, I said, keeping my tone light. We're working on cloud infrastructure for small businesses. It's early stage, but... He cut me off with a chuckle. Still playing with computers? It's time to get a real job, son. Especially now that you're getting married. You need to grow up. I froze, my smile stiff. What stung the most wasn't the comment. It wasn't even the condescending tone. It was that when I glanced at Alina, expecting a laugh, a defense, something, she just looked away. Embarrassed. She said nothing. Just changed the subject and moved on like nothing had happened. Later, in the car, I brought it up. I can't believe you just let them say that to me. She sighed. You're being too sensitive, Mitchell. They didn't mean it like that. I stared at her. He said I need to grow up. He's old-fashioned, she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. You should have just gone with the flow. That phrase stuck with me, go with the flow. As if dignity were something negotiable. But it didn't stop there. A few weeks later, her mother invited me for coffee. Just the two of us. It was odd. She picked some upscale cafe in her neighborhood. The kind of place where an $8 coffee was considered modest. Everyone around me looked like they were closing business deals on Bluetooth headsets and designer phones. I arrived early, dressed decently. She arrived late, in a crisp designer blouse and oversized sunglasses, offering no apology. She didn't waste time. I've been thinking about your situation, she began, with the tone of someone about to discuss a charity case. My situation. She reached into her leather tote and pulled out a folder, thick, pristine, and clearly prepared ahead of time. These are some real opportunities, she said, sliding it across the table. Inside were printouts of job listings, entry-level banking roles, insurance office jobs. Safe. Boring. Everything I had worked so hard not to fall into. These come with benefits. 401ks, security, she added, as if reading from a brochure. I said nothing. I couldn't even fake a smile. My eldest started from the bottom too. He's a corporate lawyer now. It's about stability, Mitchell. About building something solid. Alina needs that. She needs security. Not fantasies. I looked at her, stunned. You want me to quit everything I've built, give up my company, and become an entry-level analyst? She tilted her head, almost pitying. You need to be realistic. Alina needs a provider, not a dreamer. That word, dreamer, landed like an insult. I felt like a child being told off for playing pretend. When I told Alina about the meeting, I expected, hoped, for outrage. Or at least surprise. Instead, she just shrugged. She's doing it for your own good, she said, not meeting my eyes. Could you at least look at those offers as a plan B? A plan B. That was the moment I knew something had cracked beyond repair. And once it cracks, it spreads. The beginning of the end came soon after. A dinner she described as familiar, relaxed. Just come by, nothing fancy, she said. Wear a blazer, though. I drove to her parents' house. Sprawling estate in the suburbs. I understood, the moment I pulled into the driveway, that this wasn't going to be intimate at all. The place looked like something out of a real estate magazine. Polished stone steps, manicured hedges, chandeliers visible through the towering windows. The driveway was packed with luxury cars, sleek black SUVs, gleaming sports models, a few badges I didn't even recognize. And then there was my old Honda Civic. Dented bumper, faded paint, check engine light glowing like it was trying to warn me about more than just the car. It looked like a punchline. Inside, it wasn't just family. Her father had invited business partners and their children, young men who looked like they'd walked straight out of a LinkedIn ad. Crisp suits, polished shoes, perfect handshakes, Ivy League educations, internships at Morgan Stanley or Goldman, or something equally intimidating. They had that air about them, the kind of people who use summer as a verb. The conversations felt rehearsed. Investments, ski trips in Zermatt, real estate portfolios, European retreats, boats, private chefs. I stood by the marble-topped bar nursing a drink, pretending to listen, when all I could think about was how I'd just splurged on name-brand cereal for once. A small win after weeks of cutting costs. Then the questions started. Sharp, intentional, like scalpels hidden behind smiles. "So, Mitchell," her father said, his voice perfectly casual, the kind of casual that's anything but. "Still with that little tech project?" I glanced up from my drink. "It's a startup," I said, carefully keeping my voice even. "We're still in the early stages, but we're making steady progress." I didn't mention that our last investor meeting had been a disaster. That the prototype still crashed every time someone tried to upload a file over 50 megabytes. That Jason and I had been working 80-hour weeks trying to fix a single bug that was threatening to unravel 2 years of work. Technically, the project was barely breathing. Financially, we were gasping for air. One of her father's friends let out a low chuckle. He had that year-round tan people pay for, and the kind of smile that looked too symmetrical to be real. "Technology's so unstable these days," he said, swirling his wine. "Are you sure it's worth it? Maybe it wouldn't hurt to have a plan B." The condescension was so thick I could practically taste it. I looked to Alina, waiting for her to jump in, to say something, anything. Normally, she would have said I was passionate, that I believed in what I was doing, that I was building something real. But this time, she said nothing, not a word, not even a glance in my direction. Then he appeared. Alina's mother glided over, practically glowing, and introduced him with the kind of pride usually reserved for royalty. "Mitchell, this is Brandon," she said, almost breathlessly. "He just made junior partner at Colburn and Pike." Brandon. Everything about him screamed pedigree. Tall, clean-cut, tailored charcoal suit. A Princeton undergrad. Harvard Law. Fresh off a promotion at a corporate law firm I'd only ever heard of in headlines. He looked like he'd never once checked his bank balance before buying a coffee. Probably never even thought about it. "Nice to meet you," I said quietly, extending a hand. "Likewise," he replied, flashing that TV anchor smile. "I've heard a lot about you." We both knew that was a lie. He spoke with ease, as if reciting a script. Talked about his latest bonus like it was pocket change. His new place downtown with a skyline view. His 5-year plan to make senior partner. And Alina? She looked at him like he'd hung the moon. She laughed at his jokes, bland, forgettable things, and asked him thoughtful questions about his firm, his ambitions, his view on the market. She tilted her head, touched his arm lightly when she laughed, leaned in. And me? I stood there. Each of her questions to him felt like a tiny stab. Like something was being carved away inside me piece by piece. By the end of the night, I had barely said 10 words. Every time I tried to chime in at that dinner, it was like I was granted a brief window, 10 seconds, maybe, before the conversation was yanked back to Brandon's achievements or someone else's latest success. I'd open my mouth, start a sentence, and then get steamrolled by another anecdote about investment returns or some exclusive resort stay. I was background noise in a room where I was supposed to matter. And Alina? She was someone else. The same woman who used to roll her eyes at anything remotely pretentious, who once called people like that soulless suits with daddy's money. Now she laughed along, completely at home. She blended right in. By the time we got back to my apartment, her whole vibe had shifted. We reached the 3rd floor after a slow, winded climb. Our elevator had been out of commission for months, and as I fumbled with my keys, she let out a long sigh. "This elevator's still broken?" she muttered. I glanced at her. "You know it is." Inside, Pixel hopped onto the bed like he always did. Alina recoiled. "Ugh," she said, brushing cat hair off her blazer. "I don't know how you live like this." I blinked. "You used to love when he snuggled between us." She didn't respond, just walked into the bathroom and stood there for a few seconds before returning. "It's so small," she said, wrinkling her nose. As if this was the first time she was seeing the place. As if the string lights we put up together, the posters she helped me hang, and the futon we shared Chinese takeout on meant nothing now. And that's when it hit me. Something was broken. Not cracked, broken. I didn't know then how fast she'd make it official. A week later, she came to my apartment after work, still in her office clothes from the job at her dad's friend's firm. The one she didn't even need to interview for. She sat across from me at our little IKEA table, the one we'd eaten 100 dinners at, laughed over card games, and talked about what we wanted our wedding to look like. Her face was tense. "Seth, we need to talk," she said. I already knew what was coming. I could see it in her eyes. But I let her go on. "I've been thinking a lot about us. About what I want. What I need." I just nodded slowly. "Go ahead." She hesitated for a second, then, "I love you, but I need stability. I can't keep waiting for you to get stable. My family made me see that I need someone who's already at that point. Someone who can offer me the life I deserve. Someone like Brandon," I said flat. She didn't even pretend to deny it. "Yes," she said, straightening in her seat. Someone like him. And just like that, the mask dropped. No more polite vagueness. No more dancing around it. She gestured around the apartment like it was some cautionary tale. I tried to adapt, she said, her voice thick with contempt. I really did. But I can't keep pretending this is the life I want. Living in a rundown building, always worrying about money, dating someone who can't even take me to a decent restaurant. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the same person who used to beg me to stay in with her. Who'd say, "Why go out when we've got everything right here?" "You used to say none of that stuff mattered," I said quietly. "That you loved our simple life." She rolled her eyes. "You're 29, Mitchell, and you're still playing with computers like you're 19. Brandon has a downtown apartment. He takes me to restaurants where they greet him by name. He doesn't have to save for months just to buy a decent ring." That line hit harder than anything else. I had worked 2 jobs, sacrificed weekends, cut corners everywhere I could to buy that ring. It wasn't huge, but it was real. I was proud of it. "Wow," I said, staring at her. "I didn't know you felt that way. For years. And you're telling me this now." She crossed her arms. "I gave you 4 years to change, to become someone worth staying with. But you're still the same broke dreamer I met in college. Only older now. And that's pathetic." The room went silent for a long, long moment. Then we argued. Words became knives. Things were said that couldn't be unsaid. The tension rose, boiled over, and then she did something I'll never forget. She ripped the ring off her finger and threw it at me. It hit my chest with a dull thud and clattered to the floor, spinning once before settling between us like a final, ugly truth. "Take your cheap ring," she spat, her voice sharp with contempt. "Brandon's already talking about buying me a real one. From Tiffany's. Not like this. What is this, from a pawn shop?" I looked down at the ring. The same one she had received with tears in her eyes. The same ring she once called perfect as she posted 10 pictures of it online with captions like "Forever, finally, love wins." I didn't say anything at first. Just picked it up slowly, brushing dust from its edge with my thumb. I felt numb. Not from the shock, but from the realization that none of what we'd shared was real to her anymore, if it ever had been. "You know what's pathetic?" I said, my voice low. "Pretending to love someone while you're just waiting for them to become someone else. Pretending you don't care about status or money when you've been lying to yourself from the beginning." She flushed, her face tightening. "At least I'm not wasting my life chasing impossible dreams." "You're right," I replied, slipping the ring into my pocket. "You're not wasting your life. You're just wasting mine." She stood abruptly, grabbing her purse from the chair. She paused at the door, clearly still needing to twist the knife. "Brandon's picking me up at 8, she said with a smirk. "We have dinner reservations." So that was it. She wanted me to know. She was going straight from breaking our engagement to her first official date with her upgrade. I didn't flinch. "Good for you guys," I said as I held the door open. "I wish you all the happiness in the world." And I meant it. Not because I was mature or kind, but because if there was one thing I'd learned, it was that some people will always chase the illusion of happiness. Let her find out the hard way. 2 days later, she made it Instagram official. There they were, her and Brandon, arms around each other at some luxury resort in the Caribbean. Matching linen outfits, sunglasses, cocktails, the ocean behind them like a stock photo. She smiled like every single thing had fallen into place. The caption? "Found my forever." I stared at that photo longer than I should have. Meanwhile, I was still sleeping on the same side of the bed we used to share. Still finding her hair ties tucked in between couch cushions or under the sink. Her shampoo in the shower. Her spare charger in the drawer. Half her stuff was still there because she hadn't even had time to pick it up. And the ring, our ring, sat on the dresser. A constant, mocking reminder of how naive I had been to believe that love, hard work, and shared dreams were enough. I wish I could say I channeled all that pain into something great. That I dove into work and built a thriving company. That I rose like a phoenix and proved everyone wrong. But that only happens in movies. Reality? It was messy, slower, uglier. I fell apart. The startup collapsed just a month after the breakup. We had one final investor pitch, our last shot at keeping the company alive. And it was a disaster. The app crashed 3 times in the first 5 minutes of the demo. When it finally worked, the interface lagged so badly that half the room started checking their phones. The lead investor whispered something to his assistant, stood up, and walked out before we were even done. That was it. 2 weeks later, Jason, my partner and co-founder, told me over coffee that he'd accepted an offer at Microsoft. "I'm sorry, man," he said, eyes heavy with guilt. "I can't keep bleeding for something that's not going to survive. I've got student loans, and Maya's been patient, but I need stability." I didn't blame him. He had someone who supported him. Someone who didn't flinch when things got hard. I, on the other hand, had nothing left. A dead company. A lease I couldn't afford. Savings draining faster than free pizza at a college event. I had to give up the apartment. It was my friend Caleb who saved me. Caleb and I had known each other since freshman year of college. One of those ride-or-die friendships that didn't need constant upkeep. It just was. He never quite understood what I saw in Alina, but he never rubbed it in. Even when I brought her to game nights, and she barely spoke to anyone. Even when she turned up her nose at his microwave burritos. He stayed on my side. His apartment was smaller than mine, somehow. A single-room studio where the couch doubled as a bed and the office was just a folding table wedged between the fridge and the window. But when I told him I had nowhere to go, he didn't hesitate. Cleared out half his closet. Pulled junk out of the alcove he used for storage. Made space for me and Pixel, my cat, like we were family. When I showed up with my entire life stuffed into 3 trash bags, looking like I'd just lost a war, Caleb stood there in the doorway and just stared for a second before shaking his head. Bro, he said, I always knew she was too high maintenance. But she seriously told you the ring was cheap? I gave a tired nod, dropping the bags onto his worn-out carpet. That ring cost you more than her first car, he said, letting out a dry laugh. Which, to be fair, was a junker. But still, that comment was low. That was his way of showing support. No sugarcoating. No pity. Just real, grounded truth. A true friend. Meanwhile, Alina's new life unfolded online like a meticulously curated museum exhibit. Tropical resorts I couldn't even pronounce. Rooftop dinners where they didn't bother listing prices on the menu. Photos with captions like living my best life or deserve nothing less. Every post felt like a precision strike. Like she was saying, look what I have now. Look what you could never give me. But the worst moment, the lowest I'd sunk, was the day I ran into them in person. I was working a shift for a food delivery app, trying to hit my daily goal. My car's AC had been broken for over 3 months, and it was 95 degrees out. The windows were down, my shirt stuck to my back, and I'd sweat through what little clean clothes I had left. I'd already been driving for 10 hours, my legs aching, the city heat clinging to everything. And then I saw them, outside a downtown cafe. One of those chic bistros where the chairs are all mismatched on purpose and the iced coffees cost more than a full tank of gas. They looked like they belonged on a magazine cover. Alina had a new haircut, effortlessly styled, definitely expensive. Brandon wore sunglasses that probably cost more than everything I owned. They were laughing, holding hands. She leaned into him like she belonged in that world. Brandon saw me first. Well, he said, voice raised just enough for the people around to hear. Look who's still delivering food. That venomous smile, it wasn't surprise. It was performance. He wanted to humiliate me. Wanted witnesses. Alina looked up. She saw me standing there, sweaty, exhausted, with a delivery bag in hand. For a second, I thought I saw something shift in her face. Doubt. Remorse? I don't know. It flickered, and then it vanished. Replaced by that same condescending smile she'd worn the night she left. I didn't say a word. Just handed over the food. Turned to walk away. And then I heard him behind me. Think we dodged a bullet, huh? Her laugh followed a beat later. Sharp, bright, cutting. That moment broke something in me. Not just my pride, it carved into my sense of worth. The heat, the sweat, the way people glanced at me like I didn't belong in the same city as them. And worst of all, the mockery from someone who used to say she loved me. That was the last day I allowed myself to be treated like a failure. That night, I went back to Caleb's place, dropped my delivery bag on the floor, and collapsed onto his ratty futon. He handed me a cold soda, kicked off his sneakers, and asked, rough shift? I ran into them. I said. He didn't need to ask who. Just waited. Took one look at me and acted like I was something they scraped off their shoes. I said quietly. They laughed. Caleb cracked the soda open and took a long sip. That guy sounds like the type who thinks mayonnaise is spicy. I laughed, a real one for the first time in days. Then he leaned back, eyes locked with mine. Time to show them how the real world works. That's when my transformation began. There was no dramatic montage, no single spark. Just a quiet, brutal decision. Cut it all out. Everything that dragged me down, gone. Social media? Deleted. Distractions, toxic people, self-pity? Scraped off like rust from a blade. I went into total reconstruction mode like my life depended on it. Because, honestly, it did. Sleep became a luxury. For hours a night, if I was lucky. I delivered food during the day, stocked supermarket shelves at night, and squeezed in every second of free time to rebuild my startup from scratch. But this time, I wasn't chasing dreams with empty speeches and shaky concepts. I built with intention. No more wasting energy on perfect pitch decks for investors I couldn't even get in the room with. I stopped asking people for money to build something. I built something first. Something that worked. Something real. And I stopped trusting everyone who smiled at me. My circle shrank until it barely existed, Caleb and a couple of people who had proven they were there when everything was crumbling. People who didn't need explanations or updates. People who just showed up. Caleb was my cornerstone through it all. He'd drop off a coffee when I was deep in code at 2 a.m., shove a sandwich into my hands when all I'd eaten was protein bars for 3 days, and somehow never once complained that his studio apartment now looked like a war-torn lab. "You planning to start growing code in the bathtub too?" He joked once, stepping over charging cables and discarded takeout containers. He even landed me my first real corporate client, called in a favor from someone he knew in a mid-sized firm. "You owe me dinner," he said with a smirk, "and not from a food truck." He never asked for more, never wanted a cut. He just wanted to see me win. For 2 years, I vanished from Alina's radar. No social media meant I had no clue what she was doing or with whom, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't care. While she was playing dress-up in someone else's version of the perfect life, I was working harder than I ever thought possible. The new idea for the company came from my previous failure. I stopped trying to build a consumer app that would change the world. No more grand promises. Instead, I focused on business-to-business software. Specifically, AI-based contract analysis tools for law firms. When I told Caleb, his reaction was priceless. "So let me get this straight," he said, mouth full of cereal at 1 a.m. "You're developing a program that replaces lawyers? You're going to save the world and get revenge at the same time. That's some comic book villain level energy." I laughed for real. The project wasn't flashy. Nothing about it would go viral. It was boring, unglamorous, and probably wouldn't impress anyone at a dinner party, but it solved a real problem. I'd experienced it firsthand, trying to navigate legal paperwork when I launched my first startup. Small firms were drowning in documents. Our software could read contracts, flag critical clauses, summarize risks, all in seconds. And most importantly, people were willing to pay for it. Then everything changed suddenly. It started with a small article in a niche tech journal, then a review from a satisfied client. Word of mouth took care of the rest. We didn't have to chase clients anymore. They found us. My team was extraordinary. Real, grounded people who cared about the vision as much as I did. They weren't here for clout. They were here to build. Even Jason came back around. One day, I got a message from him. "Still at Microsoft. Doing well, but I miss the chaos. I miss the fire. You guys hiring?" I thought about it for a while, but I replied, "We're covered." Not out of resentment. I wasn't bitter. I had just found a team I trusted, and I wasn't about to break that rhythm. Within months, we were growing at a pace I hadn't even dared to imagine. We closed a deal with one of the top 5 law firms in the country. That deal brought more contracts, more prestige, and more investors. The company that had once been a bunch of ideas scribbled on whiteboards in Caleb's cramped living room was now opening offices in London and Singapore. Global expansion. Real traction. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were transforming the legal industry. The irony of it all. The biggest disruption we made was in corporate law, Brandon's field. Our software automated the exact tedious tasks junior associates were trained to do: document review, clause analysis, risk detection. The building blocks of careers like his were now being processed by AI in a fraction of the time, at a fraction of the cost. When I made the connection, I was sipping coffee on Caleb's tattered couch. "Wait," I said, turning to him, "our system is basically phasing out guys like Brandon." Caleb choked on his drink, coughing and laughing at the same time. "You're telling me your company is putting elite lawyers like that clown out of a job, and he doesn't even know it?" He slapped the arm of the couch. "This is better than revenge. It's poetic. I didn't need revenge. I had results. The first time I saw Alina again was at an industry conference. Only this time, I wasn't in the audience. I was the keynote speaker. A year earlier, I couldn't have afforded a ticket to this kind of event. Now I was on the main stage, speaking to a packed auditorium filled with investors, executives, legal tech leaders, people who used to ignore my emails now waiting to hear me speak. I talked about artificial intelligence in legal services, about agility, adaptation, the future of law. Afterward, during the networking session, a small crowd gathered, people asking for meetings, wanting demos, business cards, partnerships. And then I saw them. Alina's parents. They were standing across the room, near the wine bar. Her mother's expression froze, wine glass raised halfway to her lips, eyes wide. Her father, the same man who once asked about my little tech project with a smirk, gave me a slow, deliberate nod. Not recognition. Respect. Then I saw her. Alina. She stood a few feet off to the side. Alone. Still. Eyes locked on me like she was staring at a ghost. She was different. Still beautiful, yes. But something in her was dimmed. The light, the arrogance she used to radiate online, it was gone. She looked like someone who had built her whole world on sand and just realized the tide was coming in. We didn't speak. We didn't approach. But in that moment, just from the look in her eyes, I knew exactly what she realized. The guy she left because he was a failure was now more successful than anyone in her orbit. Later, I told Caleb about it. He replied with a message. Please tell me she had that look. You know, the one people have when they realize they just missed the winning lottery ticket. She did. From that night, things accelerated fast. In certain circles, news travels quickly, especially when someone goes from nothing to everything in just a few years. Invitations to events I didn't even know existed started pouring in. Private networking summits, exclusive investor dinners, leadership panels. Then one came from Alina's father. He didn't send it through an assistant or by email. He invited me in person. I accepted. Not for validation. Not to impress them. I already knew why they wanted me there. Not for me, but for what I represented. Success. They wanted to be close to it. Aligned with it. I showed up late, on purpose. When I walked in, I scanned the room once and saw her immediately. Alina, standing next to Brandon. He looked drained. Tense. Like someone who could feel the walls closing in, but couldn't figure out which one would fall first. He was clutching his phone like it was a life raft. His firm had been losing clients for months to firms using tech like ours. Traditional law couldn't compete with AI-driven speed and precision. The old guard was eroding, and those who couldn't evolve were being swept out. Brandon didn't know it yet, not fully, but I was the source of his collapse. Alina, though? She knew, and when our eyes met, I saw the same expression on her face that night. Only now it was intensified. Pure, uncontainable regret. A week later, she texted me. I had deleted her number a long time ago, but the message still came through. Hi, it's been a while. I was wondering if we could talk sometime. Just chat. I stared at the screen for a moment, then locked it. I didn't reply, but she didn't stop there. The following evening, security called my office. There's a woman here asking to see you, the guard said. He didn't need to describe her. I looked at the clock. The team had already left. I was wrapping up emails, staring at the glow of my monitor, and for a second, I hovered over the button to tell him to escort her out. But then I stopped. Something in me needed this. Send her up, I said. She walked into the office slowly, cautiously, her eyes scanning everything. The glass walls, the sleek modern furniture, the industry awards framed along the side. The contrast between this and the 650 square foot apartment we once shared couldn't have been clearer. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in presence. Gone was the confident, high-heeled Storm I had once known. In her place stood someone nervous, unsure, stripped of all the shine she'd once worn like armor. Hi, she said, with a sad little smile. It's been a while. I leaned back in my chair, arms folded. I didn't respond, just watched her fidget under the silence. She took a deep breath. I was wrong. About everything, she said. I listened to my family and I destroyed what we had. She bit her lip, searching my face for something, remorse, maybe, or softness. Do I miss you? Do I miss what we were? I asked, my voice flat. She nodded quickly, a spark of hope flaring in her eyes. I know I hurt you, she whispered. But maybe we could try again. I looked at her, silent. Then, after a few seconds, I laughed. Not out of spite. Not to be cruel. It just genuinely struck me as absurd. Start over. I repeated. She flinched at the words. We ended, I said quietly, the day you decided they were worth more than me. She looked down. You didn't want me when I had nothing. You didn't trust me when I needed it most. You left me for someone with more money. You call me a failure. Each sentence landed like a slow, steady blow. Her face tensed, the hope evaporating. I stood up calmly, buttoning my jacket. Alina, I said, I don't think about you. I don't miss you. And I assure you, I don't need you. Just then, the office door opened. Kelly walked in. She was exactly as I remembered seeing her the first time at a design conference. Radiant, sharp-eyed, confident without needing to shout. A brilliant product designer, and a woman who believed in my ideas when we were still sketching them on napkins in Caleb's living room. Alina turned pale. I turned to Callie and smiled. Then looked back at Alina. I found someone who's actually on my level. Turns out, it wasn't you. I walked her to the elevator. Watched the doors close. There was no rush of triumph. No vindictive glee. Just the quiet peace of knowing a chapter had finally, truly, ended. But that wasn't the end. It was just the first move in a much bigger game. A few weeks later, the whispers started. Rumors that Brandon's firm was in trouble. That clients were leaving. That senior partners were panicking. Our AI-driven system was replacing traditional legal services faster than even I had expected. We didn't just speed things up, we made them smarter. We did in minutes what firms like Brandon's billed by the hour for. And clients were catching on. The traditional partners were losing control. Instead of adapting, they panicked. Brandon and the other partners started making desperate decisions, quick pivots, budget cuts, rushed attempts to slap together in-house tech. That didn't work. I heard from industry contacts that Brandon was at his limit, yelling at employees, working 90-plus hours a week, burning through associates faster than they could hire replacements. Caleb, of course, had the perfect line for it. So the guy who mocked you for playing with computers is now getting buried by them. Beautiful. Investors started pulling out. Quietly at first, then in waves. The firm's name began appearing on lists you don't want to be on: outdated, non-compliant, inefficient. No one said it out loud, but they all knew. The firm had become a fossil. And in our industry, fossils don't survive. The best part? Brandon still didn't know I was the one behind the shift. While he was unraveling, Alina's parents entered full-blown damage control mode. The same people who treated me like I was barely worth a glance were now practically tripping over themselves trying to get my attention. Her mother started sending me emails, thinly veiled attempts to reintroduce herself as some kind of lifelong supporter. "Mitchell, we're just so thrilled to see how far you've come. We always knew you had potential." Her father, who once called my startup a cute hobby, was now quoting me in interviews, calling me one of the most promising entrepreneurs of the decade. Suddenly, I was being invited to events for networking, hosted at their country club. I ignored it all, until her father called me directly. I answered out of sheer curiosity. His tone was unrecognizable, warm, even fatherly. "Mitchell, we should talk, son. About business partnerships. Synergies. You know, leave the past behind us." I let him talk. About opportunities, collaborations, strategic alliances. But I already knew where this was going. He danced around it for a while before finally saying, "Look, I know Alina made a mistake. We all know it. But she hasn't been doing well lately. I think if you two just sat down." I hung up before he could finish the sentence. No apologies. No acknowledgement. Just a last-ditch effort to salvage their image by pulling me back into their orbit. That was the last time I ever picked up a call from them. But the real moment, the one I'll never forget, was when Brandon finally put the pieces together. It happened at another industry conference. I was on stage, part of a panel discussion on the future of AI in the legal field. We were mid-conversation when the CEO of a top global firm, sitting to my right, turned to the crowd and said, "The truth is, these guys are revolutionizing the legal market. We've partnered with them, and I can say firsthand, it's changing the game. Even the big traditional firms are struggling to keep up." The audience murmured with recognition. The cameras, which were live-streaming the event, panned over the crowd. And there he was, Brandon, sitting halfway back in the audience, frozen. His face had gone pale, lips parted slightly, eyes wide with realization. He looked like someone who had just watched their future disappear in real time. In that instant, he knew. I wasn't just some ex-boyfriend Alina dumped. I was the man dismantling his career, one client, one contract, one tool at a time. Later that night, I got a message from a mutual acquaintance. "Dude, Brandon just lost it during the partners meeting." Like, full-on meltdown. Apparently, during a strategy session, one of the senior partners brought up my company. Used us as the example of what they needed to compete with if they wanted to survive. Brandon couldn't handle it. He blew up in front of the entire team. Started yelling that I was a fraud, that I'd gotten lucky, that none of it would last. That traditional law would always prevail. The problem was, everyone looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. That was the moment they realized Brandon no longer represented the future. That place now belonged to me. But I wasn't done yet. Months later, my company was about to close its most ambitious acquisition, a mid-sized law firm with decades of prestige, respected, sharp, and, most importantly, a direct competitor to Brandon's. It wasn't just a business deal. It was checkmate. Once the ink dried, the dominoes started to fall. Their biggest clients, some of whom had been loyal to Brandon's firm for years, jumped ship. They came to us. Why wouldn't they? We were faster, smarter, and didn't charge four figures for what our AI could do in minutes. Within 6 months, Brandon's firm, once a titan in its space, was circling the drain. They had no choice but to merge with a larger firm just to survive. Brandon? He went from junior partner to just another associate, buried in the exact kind of mindless contract review he used to brag about leaving behind. The golden boy with everything handed to him had become just another name on a long email chain, trying not to fall behind in an industry that no longer had room for him. But the story wasn't over yet. 3 weeks after the official merger, Alina showed up at my office. This time, she wasn't the serene, curated version of herself she once flaunted. She was something else entirely. Desperation. It was a Friday, around 7 p.m. The office was quiet. Most of the team had already taken off for the weekend. I stayed behind to go through some contracts when my desk phone rang. It was security. "Sir," the guard said, hesitant. "There's a woman here. She seems quite upset. Says she needs to speak with you urgently." "Let her up," I said, already knowing who it was. When the elevator doors opened, I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was messy, her makeup smeared, eyes red and swollen like she'd been crying for hours. She wore jeans and a wrinkled sweater. I hadn't seen her look this unguarded ever. "Thank God you're here," she said, barging in without hesitation. "I've called you. I've texted. Why aren't you answering me?" I remained seated. "Because," I said, calm and unmoved, "we have nothing to talk about, Alina." "Yes, we do," she said, almost shouting. "I left him. I broke up with Brandon. We're not together anymore." I raised an eyebrow, said nothing. His firm collapsed. "He lost everything. And he blamed me," she said bitterly. "He told me it was all because I left you, that I ruined our lives." She started pacing the room, her arms crossed, her movements jerky, anxious. "So it's over," she said. "I'm done." "Good for you," I replied, cold and flat. She stopped and turned toward me, pleading, "Don't you get it? I'm free now. We can start over." I almost laughed. "Start over?" I repeated, deadpan. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "The biggest one of my life. I should never have left you. You were right. About everything, my family, Brandon, all of it. But I'm here now, and I choose you." She stepped closer to the desk, her eyes brimming with desperation. "I know you still love me. What we had, it was real. Real love doesn't just disappear." "You're right," I said, standing up. "Real love doesn't disappear." Her eyes lit up, hope returning. "But what we had," I continued, "that wasn't it." Her face fell. "That's not true. You left me the moment something better came along," I said. "That's not love, Alina. That's convenience." She blinked, confused, almost childlike. "My family pressured me," she said, her voice trembling. "I was young. I made a stupid mistake." "You were 26, Alina," I said firmly. "You weren't a child." That shattered whatever composure she had left. Her face twisted, and the tears came faster, ugly, unstoppable sobs. "Please, I'm begging you," she cried, her voice breaking. "I have nothing left. Even my parents won't answer my calls. I only have you. You're nothing to me," I replied without emotion. "Besides, I'm with someone else. You need to move on." She reached out and grabbed my arm like it was a lifeline, like letting go would mean drowning. "I was wrong about the ring," she sobbed. "It was beautiful. I was just scared." I pried her fingers from my arm, firm but not cruel. "No." But she wasn't finished. "I'll do anything. I'll change. I'll work anywhere. Just please, please give me another chance. I love you. I always loved you." "No, Alina. Go." Her voice pitched higher, hysterical now. "No. You don't understand. It was one mistake. One. You can't punish me forever." I reached for the phone on my desk. "What are you doing?" she shrieked. "Don't call security." She lunged across the desk, trying to slap the phone from my hand, but I was faster. I stepped back and dialed. "I need someone to escort a visitor out of my office," I said calmly. "You're a fool," she screamed. "I loved you. I gave you the best years of my life." The door opened moments later, and Tony from security stepped in. He took one look at her and kept his tone professional. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me. Please." "You don't understand," she yelled at Tony, and then spun around to face me again. "I'm giving you everything. My entire life. How can you just reject that?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Tony gently took her arm. As they reached the elevator, she turned back for one final attempt, her face contorted with rage and heartbreak. "She's only with you for your money. When you realize it, it'll be too late. And then you'll remember, I truly loved you." The elevator doors closed behind her. I stood for a long moment, just staring at my computer screen, blank, silent, still glowing. But I didn't feel anger or sadness, just calm, a firm, centered calm, like someone who'd finally walked out of a long, dark tunnel. I picked up my phone and texted Caleb. Alina came to the office, had a meltdown, got escorted out. A disaster. His reply came in seconds. Again? What did she expect? A happy ending with violins and fireworks. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was true. Truer than anything she had said. That's what she was looking for. A performance. A grand, sentimental rewrite of the past. But what she wanted no longer existed. What I was to her, I no longer was. And what she once represented to me, that had been buried long ago. The real victory wasn't watching her unravel. It was that I'd rebuilt, that I'd risen, that I didn't look back. And I wouldn't. I turned back to the glowing screen and kept working, head high, focused, steady. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.